Hi, everyone. So welcome to our event. So this is the Meet the CEO webinar brought to you by the Center for Enterprise and Society. আমি একটু বলি about Center for Enterprise and Society. So CES is essentially a leading think tank in Bangladesh that works on issues related to business and society. Those of you who followed our work will see that we've done a lot of webinars on startups, on entrepreneurship. We've invited a lot of startup CEOs and founders to come and talk to us, and of course, the greater audience that's listening in on various aspects of the startup economy, what it takes to come up with ideas, what it takes to bootstrap, what it takes to scale ideas and turn them into reality, and what it takes to raise funds and so forth. So without further ado, I just want to get down to today's topic, which is essentially Shikho. Shikho is one of the leading edtech platforms of the country, and we have with ourselves the CEO and co-founder of Shikho, Shahir Chowdhury. Shahir, if I may bring you in and just maybe you want to do a quick introduction of yourself.
Yeah. No, thank you for having me, Sajid bhai. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm the co-founder and the CEO of Shikho, which is an education technology platform focused specifically on the Bangladeshi national curriculum, and more specifically at the moment for grades 9, 10, 11, and 12. So in a nutshell, that's what we do, Sajid bhai.
Great. Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, Shahir, because you've had a very illustrious and interesting journey so far, career-wise, because you were in investment banking and no less than in the United Kingdom. You left all that. You had a 10-year career, if I'm not mistaken. So why don't you take us through, maybe start with your schooling days, take us through your education, kothay porecho and all that, and then finally, how investment banking was, and we can take it slow. We can take it step by step, because I feel like a lot of viewers might want to know who the person is behind Shahir.
Cool. No, of course, Sajid bhai. Thanks. So I mean, I grew up in Dhaka. So I grew up in Bangladesh. In fact, in Green Road, right? So my dad was a Dhaka University professor. So we used to live in the IBA quarters. And my mom is a high school teacher. Same high school I went to, believe it or not. So that was fun. So I went to Sunbeams, which is where I did my O-level and A-levels. And I think after my A-levels, I decided that I wanted to probably see a bit more of the world. So I ended up in the UK in Cardiff, in university there, where I did my BBA. And, funny, now that I think about it, I think, I graduated around 2008-9, and the economic climate was similar to what it is now. So that was basically the cycle, the very long cycle on the other end. So I graduated in 2009. It was the worst time to probably graduate. And it took me like a year of different interviews, assessment centers, what have you, until I think I landed a job right at the end. That was my last assessment center at Barclays. So there was their management training program in London. So that's how I ended up in banking, really. I didn't really have a plan. So I finished my O-levels and A-levels in Dhaka. I went to the UK, and then I was supposed to come back, but I ended up in banking because the financial crisis made me a bit interested in the world of finance. I think that's why I sort of started.
And one more thing, I think, for the viewers, because what happens is, Shahir, what's interesting and common about you and me is because I was also an investment banker, my first job. And I feel like a lot of us who don't know better, we get into investment banking. And then we've done different things that are more closely tied to our passions. But just so that I just want to say one thing, that investment banking profession in the US and the UK is considered very desirable, a very desirable sector in which to work. And desirable kono orthe ami ekটু bhenge boli. So a lot of the top students, the top universities want to do investment banking. So that's one of the reasons why I found myself in investment banking, and I'm sure you did too. And also, admittedly, it pays well. It does pay well. So এই কারণে দেখা যায় বাংলাদেশের প্রেক্ষাপটে একটু ভিন্ন। বাংলাদেশে আসলে investment banking hasn't taken off at the same level. Bangladesh, for example, a closer analogy is commercial banking, বা generally banking যেটাকে বলি। কারণ আমাদের দেশে যেটা হয় যে অনেক ভালো ছাত্রছাত্রীরা ব্যাংকে চাকরি করতে চায়, HSBC, CTNA, EBL. So এটা কিন্তু counter opposite, right? In the UK or the US, where banking is like a very coveted profession.
আমি বলবো ভাইয়া আসলে really the banking world in the UK, I guess it's much more developed in the sense that আপনার retail banking আছে, commercial banking আছে, investment banking আছে. I actually, I started off in the investment banking world, and then I sort of gravitated towards private banking, which was the wealth management industry. But আপনি যেটা বললেন, right? So প্রথমে যখন আমি actually শুরু করি management training program, I had no idea যে ফাইন্যান্স ওয়ার্ল্ডে গিয়ে আমি কি করবো বা ফাইন্যান্স ওয়ার্ল্ড জিনিসটা কি, বাইরে থেকে শুনতাম, দেখতাম বড় বড় টল বিল্ডিংস, এই ওটুকুকে জানতাম যে না এটার মধ্যে অনেক ইন্টারেস্টিং কাজ হয়। And at the time, because of the financial crisis, there was a lot of I would say, all the acronyms, CDOs, CMOs. So you have this like really, from the outside, it sounds like a very complex place that you want to understand, and it is. I mean, I had an amazing time within finance, but I don't think I knew what I wanted to do when I was getting in there. But management training program at Huklam. So I started off at Barclays. I spent 10 years in Barclays, অনেকগুলো different division. Initially in finance, I moved to treasury, I moved to strategy. I did the CFA in the middle of this. So then I moved from the investment bank and then worked towards the wealth management division.
So interesting. You have a CFA, you have the full charter.
I unfortunately have the full charter. Yeah. So
That's
it took
amazing.
me.
It's like a PhD. I mean, for those of you watching, CFA is like a financial analyst exam, several papers, 3 in fact. এবং এক একটা পাস করতে 1 বছরের মতো লাগে. So I think the whole CFA takes 2.5 minimum to 3 years, and it took you that long?
It took me that long, and it was probably the hardest time I have spent studying, I would say, outside. And we did our last, I think, poralakhar jatra really. But
so you did the CFA while you were in private banking or investment banking?
Yes. So part of the
সময় কিভাবে পেতে?
এটাই, that was life, right? So আমার সকালবেলায় ছিল কাজ, রাত্রিবেলায় ছিল পড়ালেখা, and then weekends you used to try and make the most of it. But I didn't really have a life, I think, at the time. My friends didn't see me, so বন্ধুদের সাথে কম দেখা হতো, but ওই 3 বছরে আসলে you really start appreciating a lot more of finance. It's a very tough degree. I would only say go through the qualification if you're genuinely passionate about investment management. And at the time I was, right? So when I was in banking, I decided that look, investment space টাকে আমার একটু বেশি ভালো করে বুঝতে হবে, আমি কিভাবে ক্লায়েন্টদেরকে ভ্যালু অ্যাড করব যদি না বুঝি. So then I went through the whole 3-year program, and on the other side I decided that I wanted to move towards private banking. So in the end, I sort of, my latter stage of my career in banking, so in Barclays, I was a high net worth investment advisor for private clients. And I did investment management, financial planning, and the whole shebang. And then I moved from there to HSBC, where I was a director for their private bank.
How was the experience dealing with high net worth individuals so you were based out of London?
I was based out of London, yes. I was in Mayfair, actually.
Which attracts a lot of high net worth individuals internationally.
Yeah.
A lot of money flows in London from all over the world, right? From the Middle East, from even Bangladesh, like a lot of. How was that experience?
It was amazing. It was amazing. And I think that really informed my, probably my journey or my idea towards entrepreneurs, or what entrepreneurship was. So the lucky vantage point that I had in private banking is you get to meet a lot of clients who has amazing stories to tell. And they've, the one thing that they had in common was they took a risk at some point and they bet on themselves.
Very interesting.
And going out and, deploying an idea. And a lot of my, my favorite clients used to tell me, hey, Shahir, you're still young. Why don't you go and try something?
Take a risk? You're a smart guy.
Yeah. So I think that always played a part. But নিজের থেকে আমি সবসময় বলতাম আগে যে ঠিক আছে, আমি লন্ডনে আছি, অনেক কিছু শিখলাম. I've had the the privilege to work with a lot of amazing people who taught me a lot of things. But I always wanted to come back anyways. So I think the last probably hurdle or the little push came from meeting all of these amazing people who are doing amazing things. And that was sort of my journey back home, right? So Bangladeshe ashar ekta iye chilo je sob shomoy ashte chetam, but I thought that was sort of like the thing that broke the camel's back type of situation.
Interesting. So you had all these big money boy clients, and this is serious money we're talking about, who I'm sure you struck up good relations with, very friendly relations with, and at some point these guys encourage you to take risks. So that got you to thinking, "Jay, I'm bhalo korchi, and I'm sort of the top of my game. I'm in London, and I've done really well. But then I can do more, and then maybe the final frontier, or the next frontier, perhaps, is to ride on this, or you take advantage of the digital transformation happening in Bangladesh and do something that he's doing, get to give back to the country, and it's."
I would say so, Bhaiya. So আমি বলতাম যে বাইরে থেকে আর কি 16 বছর ছিলাম লন্ডনে, and looking externally towards Bangladesh, I've always wanted to come back. আমি জানতাম না যে আমি এসে কি করব বা কি করলে আমি for society I can give something back, because it couldn't just be about making money, right? I mean, and to be honest, my initial stages of my career was, can I prove to myself that I was good in banking? I think 12 years I sort of had that self-confidence. I always plan to come back. I think education sort of really the education technology space or the digital space is something that I was looking into for other reasons. So I'd come across a research report, and I knew I wanted to do something on digital because, again, as you say, right, the digital frontier or the labeling of digital Bangladesh. And I think a lot has to do with how much the government has done work on this, right? So for the last couple of years, I remember when I first heard digital Bangladesh, and not many people really understood what it was. But we've come leaps and bounds over the last decade or so. So I think that was an inspiration. Coming back, I looking at the numbers as a finance guy, we have a huge population and a huge young population, and then you look at the rising middle class. So all the macro indicators taught to me that, look, if I do come back and I take this risk, maybe there is something worth doing that can be both, right? Can have social impact
and return.
Right, in the long term.
Yeah. So now this is a good segue. This is a good transition to what I want to talk about, because let's talk about numbers and how different it is from, startup, because I've been very involved with the sector, as you might know, in different ways, as a mentor, as an investor. Onek young founder ki kore, they see the numbers. Okay, so massive, relatively massive population. When you're next to India, it's hard to say you're massive, right? But let's say a reasonably large middle class and growing middle class. And so people say, it's a large market. I want to penetrate this market. This is the total addressable market. And therefore, my project is going to work. However, you have gone from that to now going through the daily grind of dealing with so many things, right? I mean, testing your idea, dealing with a very difficult talent market that is Bangladesh, I think. Selling your startup, your country, attracting dollars. You've gone through all that. So let's now segue into the journey part. Let's start by highlighting আমাদের সাথে যদি শেয়ার করা যায়, ধরো এরকম 3টা চ্যালেঞ্জ যেটা হয়তো আনফোরসিবল ছিল যখন তুমি এটা যখন আইডিয়া স্টেজে ছিল তোমার জন্য লন্ডনে, and then now you're doing this in Bangladesh, you've been doing it for a while, you've raised funds, you're successful. And 3 challenges that were hard to anticipate in actually walking the walk, in actually realizing the startup dream.
Just trying to think off the top of my head, Sajid. So number 1, I would say every day is a new challenge. So and number 2, I would say success is very relative. We don't really call ourselves successful internally. I think we've just started. We probably have a long way to go.
I can call you successful.
But I think the number 1 challenge for Bangladesh, as you rightly pointed out, the total addressable market, the population size, we have all the macro indicators. I think, honestly speaking, the first piece that you need to solve for venture-backed startups is actually access to strategic risk capital, right? So in that sense, that we are still a very early ecosystem. So a lot of, international investors don't know Bangladesh that well, or still perceive Bangladesh to be high risk, because we haven't had that many success stories come out the other end, and that is changing every day. Of course, it's an evolutionary thing, but what it means though is that founders like ourselves, like people who are within the ecosystem, has to do a much better job in selling or communicating the positive aspects of what the Bangladeshi opportunity needs to is to international investors. So I think that is challenge number 1. Fundraising, I didn't anticipate a person coming out of finance like myself, right, to have probably as what would I say, sort of the time that it took to get investors around to warm to the idea of education technology working in a large
more than anticipated.
Yeah, and I think that is just a learning process for me. Obviously, if you were competing for global capital here, right? So your idea has to be, one of the best, and your execution has to be one of the best in the world.
Yeah,
These
yeah.
global venture capitals can do it. So fundraising is one. Number two, I mean, when you first start out, and this is not just Shikho, I think any startup, any entrepreneur will have this issue, but like you rightly said, a lot of the stuff that we're doing internally in Chico, animation, engineering, the tech that we have, if I can be honest, I didn't know whether we had all of that talent available readily in the market. And even if you did, would you be able to attract the right talent as a new company starting out? So we've come a long way since then, of course. And what I can say 3 years into this is we have a lot of talent in this country. So it's about finding them.
And managing the talent.
Yeah, giving them the right opportunity, managing that talent, creating a structure where they can thrive and grow through the ranks. So the one thing that I am quite sure of right now is, yes, we have the engineers, yes, we have the animators, yes, we have all this other good stuff that you would need to create a world-class ed tech. But at the beginning, it was always a struggle to get the best. I think starting out, that was probably number two that I would say. And number three, obviously, the elephant in the room is online education. I mean, that when we started out in 2019, largely was, perceived very differently from what it is today. I don't think when Shikho was initially, me and Zishan were talking about it in 2019, when we looked at Bangladesh, it was in a very primitive state, right? In terms of what people thought online education could be, which was, the primitive form of edtech, or what I call edtech, is point and shoot, take that teacher offline experience in the classroom, put them online, maybe on a third-party platform like YouTube, and create accessibility. And that thing was done for free. So when we initially started speaking to people at Bangladesh, they were like, no, this is on YouTube, right? How are you going to actually create this platform that is... Well, I guess then the conversation moves to how, education technology, as a term, as a concept, it's very broad, right? So ed tech, the way I look at it is, if I was just to use the technology aspect of what it's supposed to do, it's supposed to take your traditional classroom, which has been the same for many, many years now, right? Like you've had, effectively a teacher who's a scarce resource, who's very wise, who's lecturing to 10, 20, 50 people. And, you've got desks and a blackboard. Now, what the technology is supposed to do is supposed to enhance that experience. So the most basic form of enhancement is you take a camera, you shoot that person, and then you put them on, a platform. It can be a third-party platform like YouTube. So the perfect example of this is Khan Academy, right? So everybody, well, I'm old enough to remember Khan Academy from 2005. So when I was in university, I used to watch a lot of Salman Khan's videos around finance, and he was an ex-banker as well, so his finance videos were quite good. And I remember, so that was like the basic form of what edtech can be, and I think it solves the first problem, which is around accessibility. So before, you wouldn't be able to find Salman Khan everywhere. So he shoots himself, he puts up the video on YouTube, and now everybody can access his wisdom. But if you move on from there, 2000, that was 2005, and now we're 2023, technology has other parts to play as well, within the edtech, if you look at edtech more broadly. So the second, probably I call it the pillar, is personalization. And I think that is going to be खूब important for what edtech is going to be. And a lot of these Indian edtechs and the Chinese edtechs have really focused in on this. And it's more a data-driven approach, right? Because now you're not relying on a third-party platform, you're creating the platform. So say Sajid Bhai comes onto my platform, logs onto it, and now you have, or মানে আপনি জিনিস করতেছেন এটার মধ্যে এই জিনিসগুলো ধরে personalize করতেছেন, and this personalization can't happen in a normal classroom, because if it's a teacher, it doesn't know the difference between Sajid Bhai or the rest of the 50 other learners. Sure. Yeah. And that's where tech can play a very different role, which is more data focused, and it's taking that data and interpreting it, and you can say, hey, no, Sajid needs to look at these videos and these live classes based on the testing. This is where your scores are the weakest, so push that. So that level of personalized learning, I think doesn't exist really in the market today, in the mainstream market today. People are still looking at the more primitive form of, okay, here's a recorded video or here's a live stream. I have now created accessibility to this education all across the country.
Nice. Shahir, I want to dive slightly into greater detail about each of the challenges you mentioned, right? Because I feel like one of the audience groups that I hope will be serviced by this discussion are people who are considering startups, or people who have already founded one and are, perhaps would be benefited from your ideas, your experiences rather. So the first one you mentioned was, because I also have faced this, not just in my previous life as an investment banker, but also more recently when I've worked with impact investors outside of my ULAB work. Now, my experience is very similar. যে মানুষজন বাংলাদেশকে অনেক risky হিসেবে perceive করে। যে Bangladesh is perceived as risky, and I think you're right. One is just because of lack of information and lack of knowledge, because not enough deals have gone through, etc. So not enough precedents exist. But what else? Like, what else is there? Like Bangladesh, when you have gone out and pitched to investors and you've had to sell Bangladesh and the environment, what are the perceptions of risk people have that perhaps are not well-founded? So on a kit is just question of information and things that perhaps we can do better as an ecosystem, or perhaps in general. So you can be as general as you want to be, but some color on this.
So I mean, the first point is still valid and true, that I think not many people know Bangladesh deeply enough in terms of the opportunity, right? So being able to, when you're pitching to an investor, having stats at hand, right, as to your particular problem, how big is your market, how big is the serviceable market, how big can it get? Because ultimately, most of these investors that are institutional and that are foreign, looking into Bangladesh, will only take the risk because it is a risk compared to other markets that are much better understood, that has better infrastructure, that has better success stories, and will invest large sums of money if the return at the other side is big enough. So you have to be able to communicate not only, fine, it's good to understand the macros, but how is your solution going to turn into this really large, scalable commercial outcome for them? So that's number one. Number two is being able to evidence a plan, right? A plan around a whole myriad of things. But initially, it's usually when you're starting out, it's a product and it's the founding team, and being able to sort of lay out a plan for the next couple of years in terms of how you aim to bring users onto your platform, aim to monetize that eventually. So being able to do all of that and quantify it and really tell a story, both through the macros, which is the Bangladeshi story, but how your particular solution can scale and really be a large enough market for them to get excited about and therefore take that risk.
Sure. And the second thing you mentioned was also interesting because তোমরা যখন শুরু করেছিলে, so I hear you say initially you had no way of knowing whether you'd find the right talent pool of engineers, of designers, etc., animators, but eventually you did, and then the question was of managing this talent. So what sort of growth path to provide for them so they thrive, so they stay motivated, etc. So what are some things you can share off the top of your head in terms of how you are creating growth path for people? Because the other thing that might be interesting for people watching, especially the young people watching, is Shikho a place where I can work?
Yeah.
So what are some things you've done off the top of your head that have helped you create this thriving environment for the tech people you're hiring, or the creative people you're hiring, etc.?
Yeah, great questions. I mean, ultimately, so startups scale, and from the outside that looks like a lot of fun, but it is fun, but it is equally challenging, right? So it's not very natural for a company to go from 60 জন থেকে 300 জন এক বছরের মাথায়। হ্যাঁ, so এই স্কেলটা করাতে you need to hire very—
You've gone from 60 to 300 in 1 year.
Yeah, so I think what 2021 December or 2021 November, we were about 60 headcount, and by the end of the year we were 300.
Very impressive, yeah.
If you include contractors, so that is really a challenging situation to be in, right? Because you are hiring multiple departments, and you are hiring talented people across these departments. So the one thing that I think I've personally learned is the company is as good as the people inside, but also as good as the leadership and management and the culture that you create inside. So we were very cognizant of the fact that we had to get all of those things right from the get-go. And I think we probably we've done quite well in creating a sort of a management team, a leadership team that I trust completely, and who make sure that in the absence of the founders or in the absence of us, you still have that. What should I say? The communication is there, the vision is being communicated, and everybody's working towards the same goals. But ultimately, it's really being about open, right? So initially, when the team is small, it's obvious that I can get in front of everybody. Once you stop being that person that everybody can reach, you need to ensure that you have others that you can rely on. And I think that's what we've, fingers crossed so far, we've been very lucky with.
Nice. Shahir, how did you meet Zishan, and how do you guys distinguish your roles as co-founders and within the company?
Yeah, so Zishan and I go way back, actually to the UK. So he went to university in the UK as well. He went to Royal Holloway. I went to Cardiff, and then we're the same age group, so we're from the same friend circles or overlap. So we met in the UK. So I've known him since 2005. Which is a long time now, giving away my age. But yeah, so we have very different skill sets, Sajid, honestly speaking. So his background is teaching. He went down the teaching route. So in the UK, he studied in the Institute of Education at UCL, and then graduated as a teacher for secondary school. And he taught in UK, he taught in Brunei. He then came back to Dhaka to teach. So he handles the academic side of things. He handles the knowledge department, all the content that's coming out from that side. So we have very separate roles in terms of what we both look at.
Awesome. So you also mentioned other sorts of challenges, right? So basically, now let's just talk about the product that EdTech, your product, and generally the EdTech landscape in general. So someone coming up to you and because a lot of people who are watching may have a very generic idea of what EdTech is. And I know I've had this conversation with you before. Just for the sake of the greater audience, would you mind taking us through what EdTech in the startup sort of ecosystem sense, what the different sort of components are in terms of the classes, and what are the different types of EdTechs out there? And perhaps you can just give us an overall sense of the EdTech landscape in Bangladesh before we talk about Shikho.
Yeah, I mean, I think I touched on this before, but there's a basic version of EdTech, which I was talking about, the Khan Academy style stuff, right? So in 2005, when I was in university, I used to watch a lot of this pre-recorded things that were on a screen that I could watch in my own time. I think that is version 1 of EdTech, and Salman Khan and Khan Academy was that. Most of this was on YouTube, freely available. I think version 2, or the version that came after that, now includes also live streaming. So it's not just asynchronous video on demand content, but it's live streamed content, which is the function of technology improving, right? So you can go on Facebook or YouTube now, or like Zoom, we have a live stream. So not only can you get this recorded, you can get it live. So that teacher, whoever that teacher, that knowledgeable person is, can be beamed all across the country. So that democratization of education, of access to education to that teacher is the first point that EdTech solves. I think then the other 3 elements, I have another 3 elements that I think EdTech is becoming, right? So it's personalization, gamification, and then the last bit is immersion, which is a bit more fairy tale, but virtual reality, augmented reality. I touched on personalization, which was the data centricity of it, right? So you're creating platforms where you can capture data, use machine learning, AI to give you outputs to make it personal or customized to the learner that's logging onto the platform. The third element is gamification. This is, I think, a function of effectively, how a modern learner today, right? So me, you, or anybody else, like my kid brother who's 12 years younger to me, experiences the world very differently. He's on TikTok, Instagram. He doesn't use WhatsApp. He's not on Facebook. So, the form of how these learners are now motivated to learn is different. So gamification or these point systems, reward systems, all of those concepts have to be built into these platforms to make it engaging for learners to stay engaged on these digital platforms. I think the fourth bit, which probably isn't in respect to Bangladesh, probably won't be anytime soon, but virtual reality, the metaverse, and all of that stuff will create something that's a bit more immersive.
ChatGPT.
Yeah, exactly. So if I was to touch on then personalization and gamification, I think that was core to Shikho's theme, right? So when we started off, we wanted to create not only this accessibility to this amazing teacher through recorded videos and live streaming, but we also wanted to create a platform that was very data-centric, that had the ability to personalize journeys for learners and create this sort of platform that's gamified. So it's fun to be, right?
Gamified bolte je amader ki example diba Shikho platform what sort of, because I feel like a lot of even travel platforms using.
Yeah. I mean, even Patao, right? Like I use Patao every now and then. They give you points, and then you can redeem those points to do other things. So I think gamification is part and parcel of today's sort of modern platform. But as a student, this is even more exciting because say you're learning, and then after half an hour you get a little nudge to say, hey, you've been learning for half an hour. Here are some points or some coins, right? And then ঠিক আছে, ও আচ্ছা আমি আধা ঘন্টা পড়ছি আরো পড়বো, এই জিনিসটা না আসলে ওই বয়সে আরো অনেক পাওয়ারফুল।
কি করতে পারে ইউজাররা?
So at the moment it's just points. You get points for different things. We give you badges. So there's a badge like Baghir Bacha. There's a badge like CNG if you have enough correct questions at a particular speed. So these are different types of badges that you get, but there's other basic stuff as well, like a leaderboard, right? So every exam, you get a leaderboard and you can see who else on the system is doing well versus you. So these are little things that we've built in that we're making, but that's important because honestly speaking, this is what really gets these students engaged.
Stimuli to incentivize students, like they're performing, they're competing.
Yep. And it's even more important in a virtual environment because virtual environment, like classroom there's a social element to it. Now, how do you create the socialization aspect if it's virtual? So at the moment, each user is spending 100 minutes on the Shikho app, right? So if you're spending 100 minutes daily on Shikho, what is it that you're getting?
Right? 100 minutes. Is that an average?
That's an average of our paid user base right now. They're spending 100 minutes daily, mainly because you've got classes, and then after the classes you've got homework, but you're sticking around in the system. So for us to take this further and make it a bit more enjoyable, you have to create fun. It just can't be about learning.
Shikho joto user ache, so what grade are most of them from? Grade 6 to 9 or?
Yeah, so at the moment we're focused on the 2 board exams, the SSC exams and HSC. So class 9, 10, 11, 12 is at the moment our focus.
9 to 11, okay. And they just do exam prep courses.
It's exam prep. So we do basically what we call academic programs. It runs the whole year. They're quarterly cycles and it's focused on the science students. So এখন যদি পরীক্ষা দিতে চান আপনার তিনটা অপশন থাকে, you can do science, you can do commerce, or you can do arts. So we focus in on the science subjects, which is effectively physics, chemistry, biology, maths, and then English, Bangla, ICT. So those 7 subjects we're teaching on our platform, and we do live classes as the main modality where you have a teaching panel actually teaching live instruction. After they finish the lectures, we do animated video lessons, which effectively visualize all the concepts in the book. So whatever the teacher is lecturing you about.
That's nice.
Yeah. So we instead of homework, just go and read this book. We go, hey, homework, here's a video, 5 to 6 minutes long that teaches you all these concepts piecemeal. And then after you finish all of those homeworks, those lectures, every chapter has an exam. And you can do the exam on the app or on your web portal, so the website. And at the back of this, every chapter you get a report card. Now, this is new. We brought this report card up like this year. We used to call this analysis. We realized that we got that wrong. So we're now rebadging it as a report card, and parents actually love this stuff, right? So parents go on to the system, they're working with their children, and to find out within the report card, based on the testing that you do, you can actually see unnoti proyojon ekhane, this is where you did really well, this is where you did okay on average. So you can break down that topics, and it's all there in the palm of your hands as you sort of go through that. So that's the idea, that you have a whole year, you stick with us. We go incrementally for every subject, chapter by chapter, and after each chapter, you get a report card. And at the end of it, you're probably in a better position to, cope with the board exams.
Amazing. So two quick thoughts. I mean, not quick per se, but two topics that I want to pursue or discuss with you. One is teachers, the other is parents. So teachers, I've heard from the grapevine that Shikho has some of the best teachers. Is this true?
We try our best, Sajid, but yes.
How do you get these teachers? Or do you train them? Do you have what happens?
So there are many different, so we've realized, right, that online is a very different experience. For you to be a good online teacher, you can't just be a good teacher. This is interesting, and this is a learning for us as well, right? Not all teachers who are teaching amazing classes offline can sort of take that and translate that online, right? So there is a certain teacher that can hold your attention, can motivate you, can create a level of engagement, of interaction that holds the student all the way for an hour on a screen. And we've learned this over the last 2 years through many experiments and iterations. So it hasn't happened day one. But obviously the teachers, number one, have to have a base level of credibility. So they're coming from the best universities. They've taught for 10, 12 years in offline environments. Now they've taken their game online and they're really perfecting their art. And we are supporting them with all the technology, all the production equipment, all of the the background slides and everything else, the content that they teach, to make that live class experience really incredible. But it is an art.
Is it challenging to take these teachers through this transformation journey, digital transformation journey?
I think there are two types. One is the experienced teachers who've done this and who know how to do it. The others are, who haven't had that online experience, who are, going through that transformation themselves. We're working as a team to make that as powerful and impactful, but I think we're all learning all the time, right? The new academic program, so we launched this new program this year in 2023, what I just described. And so far, we've been getting an amazing feedback, not only from students, but from parents, right? So some of these parents so we do weekly guardian seminars, we call them, on Zoom, just like this. And you have all of our parents and guardians from, these students dial up, and we speak to them. And a lot of them are actually watching the classes with their sons and daughters, which is amazing, right? Because that is really, at the core of it, what we're trying to do is consumer behavioral change, right? For ed tech to work, we need parents to start trusting online as much as they do the offline experience.
How's that working out? Because I feel like when you're dealing with education in Bangladesh, you're dealing with two levels of customers. You're dealing with students and their parents. So how's that working? Because I'm assuming that Baiju in India used to sort of target parents and send people over, then an army of brokers, and they used to go and take parents through the entire platform. Auntie, uncle, eভাবে use করতে হয়, এটা use করলে এই সুবিধা হচ্ছে ইত্যাদি. So have you had to do some of that, or do you plan to do some of that?
So, I mean, it is tough because parents don't fundamentally don't obviously understand all of the stuff that I've tried to explain, right? They don't think about, oh, there's a platform, I can do live classes, animated lessons, testing, report cards. So the only way you get them to really believe you is they use the product. They have to use the product, and they have to really enjoy using that service, right? So I think that's the gradual change that we're seeing. As people use the platform, both students and the parents are like, oh, okay, so this is, hold on, so I don't have to travel 1 ঘন্টা করে 2 সাইডে, so 2 ঘন্টা প্রতিদিন জ্যাম ঠেলে যেতে হবে না কোথাও, আমার transport cost is saved. I can do this anytime I want. So it's not just the money, it's the convenience of it. And over and above this is better than the offline experience because you have a lot more value that you're adding. So now and I think that is the main point that I'm trying to make, is it's not going to happen overnight. but we are making a dent in the sense that a lot of these parents are coming back and saying, this is amazing. We're going to stick with you for the, until my child is through all of these exams. So that reinforcement is very, very positive at the moment.
Interesting. Okay. So, what's next? Do you have like, if I could sort of ask you, where do you see Shikho? Like a vision, I suppose, like 10 years from now, so forth. Like, what do you think is likely to happen? Do you think, of course, you'll have more market penetration. Of course, I'm sure you'll have tied up with like secondary schools, and you'll have done more, perhaps work with even universities, I'm sure. But do you envision maybe a Shikho footprint outside of Bangladesh? Because I'm feeling you probably do, because you have had such an international background. So what, I want to hear from you. So what does the future look like for Shikho?
So I think number one, Bangladesh is still a huge opportunities. We've hardly scratched the surface. I mean, all of EdTech really, we're just getting started out, right? So there is a lot more work to be done to make sure that education technology, number one, is being solved for our students. And there are many different challenges, right? Like, so network issues, device issues, making sure all of the app actually works on all these devices so that we can reach scale, right, all across the country. But I mean, the broader vision in 5 to 6 years' time, if you look at it, I think learning is going to digitize more and more, right? So it is we are going to move towards that direction naturally, whether it's in secondary school, professional learning. So we have Bohubrihi, which is a sort of a professional upskilling brand, which we're building out as well. So we think, or I think, in terms of the Shikho umbrella of companies, that digitalization within education is just it's happening globally. In Bangladesh, we are catching up slowly, but we are going to leapfrog a lot of the steps that other countries have taken, because we're going to catch up quicker because we've seen everything else happen around in India. So I think for Shikho, we will probably in 5 years' time still be looking at Bangladesh, because it is a very, very tough market to make sure that we've covered properly. And you can't just transplant the edtech. From what I've seen, there are many different nuances to each market. So you've got a product, making sure that your go-to-market, your distribution, your marketing, your communication is right, is so very, very, very specific to that market that you're trying to solve, that going to another market is usually not, probably for education at least, not the easiest answer to expand. So we are still focused in Bangladesh, and I think there's plenty of room in Bangladesh, from secondary, further down, and professionals to grow edtech and to make meaningful impact here.
Interesting. Thanks, Shahir. So we have a few questions from the audience that I've collected. So I'm just going to shoot, questions at you if you're okay with that.
Yeah, of course.
So the first question is, what sort of government support are you experiencing with regard to EdTech, and what sort of policy support would further, help EdTech?
Well, I think I said at the outset, the overarching sort of or the place that we have around, there's a lot of support for the startup ecosystem in general, right? And we're not just talking about education per se, but obviously this is a very key agenda for Smart Bangladesh, for the vision for Smart Bangladesh as well. Education, or the smart citizen, right? Making sure that there's more access to equitable education for all will be, fundamental to making sure that the government's vision for Smart Bangladesh is achieved. And I think EdTech will play a key role in that. At this moment in time, I don't think there's any policy reforms that are required. Really, it's on us for the startup themselves to make sure that we're building a product that, number one, can be scaled across the country efficiently. Once we've reached that, point of scale, I think there's a lot of support that we can access if we need to, through, the ICT ministry, Startup Bangladesh. You have all of these different bodies that are really turbocharging the startup ecosystem within Bangladesh. And,
very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. Another question that we have, in quotation marks, having your own business provides you with great autonomy. Is this a myth, Or is this the truth? Or is it true?
No, great question. I think one of the biggest changes, moving into an entrepreneurial role from working in large companies is you do get a lot more autonomy. But I think this is a saying from Spider-Man with great. What was the saying? Peter Parker says this.
With great power comes great responsibility.
That's right. That's the one I was looking for. Yeah. So I think autonomy is good, but yeah, you have a lot more decisions to make, and therefore you are a lot more responsible for a lot more, many things, including a lot of people here. So yes, I enjoy it, but autonomy is something that you should. There comes a time for autonomy, is what I was trying to say, Sajid. I think I spent 12 years, and I was very lucky to work with really amazing people, managers, colleagues. I learned a lot of the hard skills the hard way in my early days as an analyst in banking. So once you're ready for it, I think the autonomy really helps. I think it's something that I was craving. And internally within our organization, Shikho, I think people are empowered, right? So the one thing that we do is we make sure that there are enough people within the organization that have been empowered to work with autonomy, regardless of where you are, as long as you're ready for it, basically.
Very interesting. Thank you. Maybe we will take one more. So another question that we have here is, how important is it for entrepreneurs to understand artificial intelligence?
I don't think as an entrepreneur, you need to, unless you're working on an artificial intelligence project, company, startup, to have that level of deep knowledge. Okay. I mean, AI is obviously very important for the future. I would not say I understand AI very well at all, to be honest, apart from, just having general text. But, you will have, if your company is building things using artificial intelligence, you will have experts in those fields eventually that should be able to guide you in terms of the applications of AI.
Okay, sounds fair. Any last words or any final sort of, any sort of message you may want to end this with for budding, aspiring entrepreneurs and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, all I would say is that, as Bangladesh, as an economy, as a country, we are, probably the most well-placed amongst, definitely in South Asia, but, one of the well-placed in the world in terms of the macroeconomic potential that Bangladesh has. So there is a lot of opportunity from an entrepreneurial perspective. I think if anybody is aspiring to be an entrepreneur, the one thing that I would say that you should have at top of your mind is that there is plenty of opportunity. The problem means there is opportunity, but whatever you're trying to execute, you should execute at the highest levels of quality. As long as you can do that, as long as you can communicate both your solution and the Bangladeshi opportunity, then you will be able to attract the capital, the investors, and hopefully, as you execute, the customers, which is the most important, really, to your solution. But the principle is aim for quality, because you need to build world class if you're trying to attract investment from global investors.
Thank you so much, Shahir. It was wonderful speaking to you again, and hope to talk to you in real life very soon. And thanks to all of you for watching this. This is Sajid Amit signing out. So this is brought to you. I'll just leave with. Do check out our Facebook page. It's the Center for Enterprise and Society. I'm sorry, Facebook page. So it's ULAB.CES, and stay tuned for our next events. Thanks once again. Yeah, and we'll see all of you soon. Bye-bye.